Hello, everyone. This is Stephen with AI Culture, where I talk about the human side of AI with different scholars from around the world. Today, I'm talking with a Māori activist who's going to be talking about how to make AI more accessible. Today, I'm talking with a Māori activist who's trying to make AI more accessible to Māori people and other Pacific Island peoples, and try to rethink how AI is being built, particularly in New Zealand. So I hope you enjoy our conversation. It's important to think about how different communities approach AI and how to make. It's important to think about how different communities approach AI and also how to make AI make. It's important to think about how different communities approach AI and how to build AI that is that relates to different cultures around the world. And in case you're wondering, I'm currently in Randra Ampat. This is the Kuriburi, or the Blue River. It's really beautiful. But that aside, I hope you enjoy. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Karaitiana Taiuru. How are you doing today?
I'm really good, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, so you have done a lot of work in AI, and maybe do you want to kind of introduce like what you do and what made you interested in this kind of tech stuff?
Sure. So I've been in the tech industry, or what we used to call the IT industry, for about 30 years now. So when I first started in the IT industry, I realized it was very anti-Indigenous, anti-woman, it seemed to be anti-everything except for, basically white men, and it was very commercial and extractive. So then I guess, my career ended up in data management and data governance, and then in particular with a Māori focus, so the Indigenous peoples of New Zealand. So that led me down a number of years working in Māori data sovereignty. And then as someone in the IT industry, we've always known about AI, and we always thought that it was going to be in the future. So I dabbled around with some AI ethics, with the data ethics. And then, as we know, when ChatGPT arrived, it was a bit of a shock. And I guess my concerns were that, Indigenous peoples, Māori, we had a lot to risk. And so I've dedicated my career since then ensuring that there's a Māori voice in New Zealand being heard with AI, trying to get some of those risk mitigations, and ensuring that people are aware that AI is good and bad, but let's try and make AI good for everybody. So that's my background.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I will say, so like when I look at the US data, I don't know about New Zealand, but when I look at the US data, of all the fields of like AI or tech or IT or tech, data science is often, and still now is like the worst in terms of being kind of over selective of white males. And there's a lot of reasons for that. That can be, but that's a bit of a complicated conversation in and of itself. But like it is like, of the tech fields, it's like tech is often this biased, and then data science can be this biased. What is your experience has been like? You kind of originally noticed this bias many years ago. Has it changed to you, or is it kind of the same old song and dance?
Yeah, it's still the same bias, but I think with AI, it's just increased the bias substantially and created lots more new risks. Facial recognition technology. The research that's come out of America is just overwhelming. Facial recognition technology is racist, is biased. Down here in New Zealand, we've got the same issues, not on such a large scale, but the data sets haven't been trained on Polynesian faces. So the latest research we had was that facial recognition technology it's hit and miss with Pacific people and Māori. And one of our cultural one of our cultural attributes is a lot of people have tattoos on their face, cultural tattoos. We call it moko. And so we see that the technology just blurs up and creates shadows and, basically can't see a person. We're seeing bias data about the criminal system, historical biases that have been around since 1840 are still sitting there. But to some of the AI's credit, ChatGPT, for example, and Claude, and many others I experiment with, they are not as bad as they could be. Often they fact check themselves to say, well, this is probably not true, or this is based on biased data, etc. But we've still got the bias is there, and it's harmful. I think things could be worse, but at the same time, in New Zealand and around the world, we have Indigenous data sovereignty principles and frameworks. So it's really important for New Zealanders that we implement Māori data sovereignty frameworks. And I think one of the issues I've seen in the data sovereignty area is that the Indigenous data sovereignty principles and frameworks have only been Indigenous. And I think we need to take good Western data governance and intertwine Māori and Indigenous data governance into that, and recognise the instruments from around the world, whether it's the AI Act or the OECD principles. We need to intertwine it and match them up. And I fear that if we don't do that now, we will have an AI that probably doesn't recognise or care about Indigenous peoples or care about Māori people. And I guess we're kind of seeing that playing out for Māori, because we're a minority part of the population of a very little country at the bottom of the world, which a lot of people don't even know where we're at or who we are. So when you have big tech companies creating tech, they don't always consider smaller Indigenous populations, and I think that's a real risk.
Yeah, this makes total sense. Two quick stories that relate to what you're saying, and then I have connect to a question I want to ask you. But when I was also talking with someone by the name of Shay Parsons. So by the time this is posted, that will be posted too, because I did the conversation a couple weeks ago. But she mentioned she's also a Māori individual, person who works in AI, and she was talking about how when she visited, she had some conference in the US somewhere, like LA or wherever, and when she was there, the people often assumed she was Latina. They looked at her skin color and her and just assumed in the US context that she was Latina, and she's like, I have no clue what the AI models, what the visual the data visualization softwares, what they thought my racial group was. If the regular people are thinking I'm Latina, I bet they were not right either. So she was talking about there can be a lot of almost just straight up bad reporting, especially if that model is trained in one place like the United States, based off of patterns that it observes in the United States and then applied to a place like New Zealand. And then real quick with what you were saying at the end, when I visited New Zealand, many of my friends did know where New Zealand is, but a couple of my friends, one of my friends didn't know where New Zealand was, and I was like, she was like, is it in Europe? And I was like, no, very much not. Which might be a decently telling one to confuse it with in this type of conversation, because she probably associated New Zealand with a strong white population, which is not exactly fair. That's probably where that came from, but maybe a bit of a Freudian slip there. But I guess you did a good job talking about the two things I wanted to talk about with you today. So I guess let's first talk about the problem and some of the concerns you were talking about with the data. You talked about data visualizations. You also talked about like police, criminal data, and stuff like this. And then I want to talk about the frameworks that you talked about in the second half of what you were saying. But yeah, I guess let's start with the problem first. What do you see? So, you were talking about like examples of what happens when some of these models that are built in places like the U.S. get applied and how that affects people in the Maori context. Do you want to kind of go into a little more detail, like what are some of your biggest concerns? And I'm particularly interested in the criminal data too.
Sure. So I guess I have a number of concerns. So I guess one is our traditional culture will be erased, and it'll be favoured for American culture because it's the dominant culture of AI, right? So it makes sense that will happen if we don't look for solutions to that. I think we can end up, our culture could just end up being commercialized and sold back to us. For a lot of our communities, we're worried about our language. Our language was almost extinct, and since the 1970s, there's been a lot of activists and a lot of work to revitalise our language. While that's happening, we saw very quickly. So Google Translate basically took contracted a Māori data scientist who went over to the States there, and Google Translate was using our language. It did a really bad job of it and changed the language a lot. We see that most AI now can speak Māori language at a reasonably good level, which is a concern. I guess there's concerns there that our language will be commercialized and sold back to us, to people who want to learn the language. And so the flow-on effects of that would be that would have loss of cultural knowledge. People won't go back to their traditional communities to learn the language anymore because they'll be paying for it from AI. AI is already creating new words which don't exist, and basic hallucinations of translations. There's all that area as well. Cultural and intellectual property appropriation and misappropriation is already happening. And then, as you say, with the criminal data, if you look at the data without the history, the data will tell you that Māori are overrepresented in New Zealand jails. And then that's it. And so, so basically that just equates to Māori are more likely to be criminals. But then if you look at the history and the bias in the court system, the New Zealand police admitting there was racism in the police force, the justice system admitting bias and unfair treatment of Māori in the court system, the injustices of colonisation, the uplift of Māori children into residential homes and schools. There's a whole lot of history which doesn't get unpacked with that, and it can create a rather incorrect picture. Then I guess we've also got the police using that same data, creating profiles of communities. So without that human in the loop there, we could see communities being unfairly policed, and we already do at the moment. We're seeing the court system using algorithms which have been written without input from Māori communities. So it offers a very colonial view of society and ignores all these little nuances of being Māori. So, for example, in New Zealand, you typically go to year 13 at school. A lot of Māori don't make it to year 13. They choose other jobs. Maybe it's working with their communities. Maybe it's looking after their parents or cultural relevant appointments. So the data makes it look like Māori they're educated in some areas, simply because it hasn't been considered in the algorithm, right? So the key concern that I have is that the algorithms are being created by people in their offices and not actually talking with communities. We know algorithms don't consider Māori views. They're generally discriminate against disabled people, and all the other minorities in society. Again, I see this happening all over the world, and it's something that we need to get, stand up and be heard to be included.
Yeah, this makes sense. I mean, this is really sad. There often is holes in the data, and I guess there can be there's two sides to this, which is there can be a like the data can often lean in certain directions or be trying to be oriented towards certain things. So like criminal data is like this. It's like who's reporting, it's ostensibly supposed to report crimes, but often that's reflective of more of where the police are, not which groups of people actually commit crimes. And there's a lot of parallels to that in the US. There's a lot of groups that have been known to disproportionately be reported in criminal data or just disproportionately be imprisoned, particularly Black and Latino populations. But with it seems like and then on the other side, there can be holes in the data. So like the data doesn't properly understand education for these Māori communities and then just misreports it based off of that. This is, and I have, like you said, I have seen parallels of this in other parts of the world. Like I used to teach in Uganda, where I think some of the data in some of the rural populations on education just didn't really make sense of what people actually did, which was a bit, it just didn't encapsulate the nuances. Like, what do you think has built this, these types of biases, and then what do you think would help deal with them?
Sure. So I think in New Zealand, looking at our history, and as a keen amateur historian of New Zealand history, it's just those, the human biases have contributed towards biased data. And then when you have data scientists and data collectors and academics and who are typically European or non-Indigenous, and they've got no experience with Indigenous populations, their view of the world is very different to our view of the world, right? So hence the data never has a chance to, have a chance to be unbiased. It's always going to be biased because there's no community input into that data. Academics I've spoken to in the past have said, sometimes it's just too hard trying to get fair and accurate data from Māori communities. So they just leave the holes there. They admit there's bias there, but for them, they just it's a matter of economics. They only have enough funding for a certain period of time. So I think some of the ways we can address this is encouraging Māori populations to look at careers in data science, in AI. We need to ensure that whenever we're creating any AI systems or any algorithms, that there's consultation and development with Māori communities. The quicker, in New Zealand at least, the quicker we normalise that co-design with Māori communities, and embed it within the AI lifecycle, embed it with creating any new government algorithms. This is the only way that we can start to address the issues. I think, but then we need the individuals who want to get into this area. And at this stage, it's not marketed as a as a good career, or it's not really marketed at all in New Zealand. And I think, in New Zealand here, there's different professions which are marketed to different communities. And for Māori and Pacific people, we have a whole range of role models for sports, in particular rugby and netball. But if we could, get the same sort of role models for in the data AI sector, then we could, I think that's going to be a huge change. We need to look at the frameworks, and we need to co-design these frameworks that have the Indigenous perspective, our Māori perspective, and the best Western data governance combined together. But then actually, having like a crossroads or an explanation, how do the Māori cultural rights of data match best with Western best data governance, and then you're getting that balance. As I said before, I've seen Māori data governance frameworks which are very, very strong culturally, but don't add up with data governance, and they contradict each other. So it's definitely it's key to have cultural practitioners and data governance experts working together and creating new solutions for the data.
Yeah, this makes total sense. Let's hop into both of these. So we'll start with the first one, and then which is the kind of the education promoting data science, and then we'll talk about the governance. So on the education side, how would you, like, in your view, how would you promote data science within Māori communities? And one kind of thing I'm thinking about in the context of asking this is about to be a little bit of my experience with this in the US, but it'll connect, which is that, like I said that when I looked at the data, like data science is often the most like white male, disproportionately white male, like of all the fields of tech. And when you both look at the data, and when I read a lot of the like sociologists and anthropologists who study this specifically, one key factor, there's many reasons why it's that way, but one factor in why that they'll and again talk about is how data science is this. So obviously there's a lot of downstream problems that lead to this within tech, and one of them is education. So like STEM education, well known for sometimes often disproportionately rejecting racial minorities, women. There can be a lot of like issues with education that lead to that. And within data science, you get like almost in some ways some of the worst of the worst. So like data science is this confluence of like programming skills, computer science skills, and math skills, both of which can like many minorities can be much more likely to conclude this isn't for me because of the kind of structural things within education. And I guess, so like one factor is the downstream impacts of that. So I'm a bit curious as to both what you think about on that in New Zealand, but then also one tension I would see in trying to kind of deal with this is that you kind of had two different sides, which is trying to promote more education, we'll say STEM education or something like this in the US, among, and kind of address it on that side. But that, like, I used to be a math teacher, so I thought a lot about this side of things. But like, that's a bit of a generational thing. Like the damage is already done with people our age. They grew up often thinking this is not for me, and then they didn't pursue it, develop that skill set, yada, yada, yada. But like, if you solve the education side, that won't really impact now. They'll impact the next generation, at best. But like, so then you have this tension between like promoting it with current workers and then also the education side. This is all the context in which I'm thinking about this. So that I'm just kind of laying that all out. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, so there's a number of different aspects here. So I think Yeah, traditionally, I mean, if you wanted to study data science, you're going to walk into a classroom in New Zealand and it's going to be probably full of, young white men. And they're probably not going to be culturally aware, and it's probably going to be culturally unsafe. We've got societal issues. So when I first started out in the IT industry, my elders basically said, "What are you doing? Don't get into that stuff. That's it's bad for our culture. It's and it was really frowned upon." So we've got that sort of intergenerational thinking that we need to stop that thinking and encourage more Māori into tech fields. But how we do that, we need to ensure that the education is culturally safe. We need to use our own traditional knowledge as a way to try to teach data science. And we've got small pockets of education facilities in New Zealand that do just that. They're by Māori, for Māori, and they use traditional knowledge, and they teach robotics, they teach programming, they teach data science. And all these young Māori students, they just, they get it. And I mean, something else we need to consider as well is part of that language revitalisation in New Zealand. We have preschools that we call kohanga reo. And so this is where, so we have generations of young Māori who've been brought up speaking Māori as a first language. And they've been brought up fully immersed in cultural values and cultural, learnings within education. So we need to adapt how we, train, some of our Māori youth, and do that. I think, another issue for me is when I look around the Māori business world, I look at all the Māori leaders we have. We seriously lack in Māori leaders with technology. We don't. I mean, I can't. Out of all our Māori leaders, we don't have anyone in the AI space or the data science space. We are well established, in law, business, agriculture, horticulture, you name it. Where the Māori economy is thriving, but it doesn't really include AI and data sciences. Now, I think some of this is about fear. Some of it is about being culturally unsafe. We've had 3 or 4 research reports done in the last few years about why Māori don't join the tech industry. And it's because it's culturally unsafe. It's just so different. In the tech space, we like we're doing right now. We're just talking to each other on a computer screens, right? It's yet from a lot of people, they want to be physically face to face talking to people. So this is strange for some people. There's the biased data, all these other things. I think put people off. We also have a digital divide in New Zealand, and that's increased to become the AI divide. And it's typically Māori and Pacifica who don't have access to computers, who don't have access to the internet. So that's another contributing factor there. So, there's just, so many different layers here. But I think the solution would be looking to our Māori education providers and creating resources to that use our traditional knowledge, use our culture, and upskill and train Māori in this area. I think awareness. So we know that our communities, that they want the data. They want a better future. They want to increase the economy. They want to address social inequities, financial inequities. So I think one way would be to actually say, look, if you have a cohort of young Māori who data scientists, this is how you're going to get your data. This is how you're going to get the unbiased data. And this is how you're going to get your results. Instead of just concentrating on having people at the front line, let's look at getting people in the back office, crunching that data and writing those algorithms, and just really working to achieve success for Māori that way.
Yeah, this makes sense. I mean, with the last point, it probably should be emphasized. We're talking about data scientists as if they're like a monolithic job, but it's a whole industry in effect, or field, whatever word you want to use. But like, there's so many different positions, and probably there needs to be Māori people in the different facets to further provide this type of context that you're talking about. And I mean, this also reminds me of there's a lot of data science programs that are saying like we need to incorporate more social science thinking that help people, data scientists, become more trained in thinking about the social aspects of data. One thing of the things you said, I wanted to zoom in on was Māori people not feeling safe in the tech space. Yeah, in your experience, whether that's talking to others, maybe your personal experience, but when you hear Māori people are like, I'm not safe in this space. Can you give examples of what that looks like? What aspects make them not feel safe?
Sure. So based on the research and my personal experience, I mean, I've worked in IT departments, I've worked in IT teams and corporates. And so I agree with what the research says. We typically, my experience in the research seems to suggest that people who work in tech, probably not so much in the last 5 or 10 years, but prior to that, were typically people who weren't culturally aware. They've been brought up in New Zealand, typically well-educated, but not very little integration with Māori culture or Māori communities. So often the first thing that happens is you walk into an IT department or a tech team, and it's like, your name's too hard to pronounce. What can I call you? That's a common, and it's really offensive. So that's, but that's like, it seems like it's like the tech culture. Everything's got acronyms and abbreviations, and it's fine. So that's one thing. No offense to all of my tech colleagues, but often people don't have all the social skills that. So Māori are very, very sociable. We like to talk, friendly. But often, some of the best tech people I've ever worked with have been very antisocial. But I mean, I learned to work with that during my career. But if you've got a young person straight out of university, who's gone straight from high school to university, straight to a tech team, it's going to be a real culture shock there. And I think, it's just that whole not being aware of, or not having integrated with Māori communities is probably the big issue. I don't believe there's anything malice, or I don't believe it's anything intentional. It's just the way that New Zealanders and the sort of people that are attracted to the IT industry.
Yeah, this makes sense. I mean, this has also been my experience in tech. You said it was worse 10 years ago. It's in the last 10 years working in tech. In my experience, it has been pretty bad. So maybe it was worse, but I have seen similar things, not specifically with Māori, because I haven't worked with Māori tech professionals. I've worked in other cultural contexts with other groups, but I have seen similar things with different groups. I wanted to ask about also about the data governance. So you talked about this. Do you want to kind of describe what kind of work you've been doing? A lot of work around data governance and trying to kind of establish Māori frameworks, and what has that been like, and what do you see as like what do you see works in terms of frameworks, or how do you approach this, I guess?
Sure. So in New Zealand, Māori as Indigenous peoples, we're very unique and very lucky to have a constitutional document or a treaty with our government. Up until recently, the government's been very supportive of honouring and recognising that treaty that's called Te Tiriti o Waitangi, or the Treaty of Waitangi. So typically, I think it's important to use the treaty as a basis for any good data governance framework that recognises Māori data governance, and then incorporate Māori values and Māori world views. So, for example, we talk about privacy. Māori often have collective rights to data and to things, where traditionally from a Western perspective, it's usually private, it's individual ownership. So you're having that, understanding the differences. But then it's definitely important to make sure that we grab the Western data governance best practices. We look at the work from the United Nations, the work they've done with AI and data, the OECD principles, the Europeans AI Act, and just make sure that we just pick and choose what suits us. Is what I've found to be the most effective way. In the past, as I said, we've had data governance frameworks which are just strictly cultural. And I've been in meetings where data governance people just say, "Look, this does not work. We can't make it work. It's at odds with all of our best practices. It's at odds with our security practices." So making sure that the cultural people work with the data governance people, and I think this would be applicable to everyone, or all Indigenous and all minorities in the world, is to have that partnership, understand and respect each other, and respect that some things are possible, some things aren't possible. But the key fact, or the key point, is to make sure that data is it's safe and it's not biased, and that it reflects the cultural values of the people that the data is about. So in New Zealand, for example, so Māori, some Māori believe that the data has a spiritual connection if it's about them. Some Māori don't, but some do. So from a Western data governance perspective, that's a bit of a cultural shift to try and understand how that works. So again, I think just having open minds and realising that we're not all the same in the world, right? We're a very diverse world, we're a diverse country, and just learn to incorporate and accept each other's differences.
This makes total sense. I mean, I could see I think it's important to also to make sure that the technology, because the technology is built in a cultural context, most often in the United States, to make sure it makes sense in the various cultural contexts in which it's used. What would you say, like, what do you think would change with AI technology for it to better kind of represent, or represents the wrong word, abide by Māori cultural values, or kind of make sure it fits within that? Like, what would that look like?
Yeah, I guess, in the ideal world, we would have a sovereign AI in New Zealand that was designed straight from the very first stage of the AI lifecycle. It would be designed in conjunction or co-designed with Māori. And a lot of Māori values are values that everyone wants. Respect, respect for the environment, respect for each other, being, recognising each other's differences, making sure it's fair and safe, making sure that the AI doesn't hurt people. I think these are things most people would agree would be good to have in an AI. And we have a saying here: "What's good for Māori is good for everybody," and I firmly believe that. And then we would have teams working on bias, de-biasing the data and looking for new opportunities. I think it's just so much potential there. It's hard to kind of pinpoint where to go. But I think the key message is working with Māori communities will help create a better AI for all New Zealanders. And likewise, I believe the same with other Indigenous peoples around the world. I mean, if big tech works with Indigenous peoples, the AI will be both environmentally and human, better off for humans than what we have now.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I feel like what do you see as some of your? Cause I'm sorry, I needed a second to kind of figure out. I had two thoughts coming in at the same time. I guess this is one of the kind of the tensions I will see sometimes with these types of frameworks. Is sometimes it can be a bit of a like, this is the particular values of these particular communities, and then sometimes I'll look at them and I'll be like, that's just as good ethical practice, and it's kind of critiquing the tech industry for the ways in which it's not doing good ethical practice. Like in the U.S., also it's critiquing things that should be critiqued, I guess, and that might be helpful to apply more broadly across humanity. But in terms of not doing harm, what do you see as some of the biggest ways, biggest things to safeguard in terms of AI? Like, what are your biggest concerns when it comes to AI harming people, and how do you see safeguarding those?
Yeah, so I see. Yeah, AI will, without appropriate governance and protection mechanisms, AI will harm humans at some time in the future. I think as Indigenous peoples, when AI is harming us now because it's creating a new culture, it's erasing our own culture and replacing it with AI values, which Indigenous peoples haven't contributed to. And so, I think that's a real risk. And I think when we have agentic AI, will agentic AI recognise Indigenous peoples, or is it going to think that everyone is the same, that as the engineers that built it? So and then will the English language, will that be the only language people speak based on AI, or is it probably English and Chinese right at this stage? But I fear that a standardisation of culture and languages is a real risk. I definitely fear that there's my fear about AI being built for productivity, for commercial, for power, and not considering the human aspect is rather dangerous. And personally, I'd like to see artificial intelligence regulated all around the world. And particularly in New Zealand, I believe it should be regulated. It should match up to our human rights and our constitutional agreements in New Zealand. And then New Zealand should either have its own sovereign AI or demand that these human rights are considered before we use any international AI.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I was reading a paper that was talking about how the recent AI technologies, particularly LLM chatbots like ChatGPT or whatever, have influenced languages in the prioritization of languages. And it was talking about how it prioritizes certain languages, some of which are already kind of massively prioritized languages like English, Chinese, Spanish. I'll try to include it for any viewer in the description, because you have to read the whole article. It does talk about there are many indigenous languages that are just kind of put by the wayside. Some indigenous, a couple languages have been able to actually rise in priority. There's a lot of nuances there, but there's, like you said, you said English and Chinese. I think there were 4, maybe 5 that get really emphasized, at least according to that article. But anyways, yeah. So what you're saying makes absolute sense. I do think. I mean, this is. I think that. I mean, right now the technology is new. So in a way, this is something we have to think about the new capabilities. But really, these issues have been around for a while, and in some ways, this is the the latest iteration of a series of tech developments that have been driving this and having this impact, at least in my mind. I wanted to also ask you. You had said before, the thing you kind of drove home earlier was the importance of incorporating Māori individuals into organizations. And I wanted to ask you, how would you recommend doing that based off of your experience? What ways, we'll phrase it like this: say so-and-so is a New Zealand-based tech company, and they're like, I agree, I need to include more Māori voices, or do this with regard to the community, to help make sure that the AI technology that I'm building is better equipped with regard to that. How would you recommend they do that? Organizationally, what has worked in your opinion?
Yeah, definitely. So, I know from experience with non-IT companies who want to ensure that they can work and respect Māori communities. The best solution is to engage with the local Māori communities. Have an open mind, and maybe there's things here we call a noho marae, where a group of people go to our local traditional house and stay for 3 or 4 days and learn the culture and, just basically hang out and team building exercises. Looking at, integrating Māori values into your vision statement documents, into your strategies. And again, these are just, as you said before, these are just, good ethics, really. Most of cultural values are just good ethics. Employ Māori, adapt cultural practices in your day. I think some organisations probably do it tokenistically, but with good intentions. But I think, if you just make it part of your workplace culture, adopting and using some Māori cultural practices, I think it's a good way of doing it. And as I said, I've seen it work with other organisations. Some of the ways of doing this too is having a sort of a flat structure in an organisation, which I think a lot of tech companies now aren't as hierarchical as they used to be. But everyone, treat everyone the same, get the cultural relationships going. Look at what your company can do to invest back into the Māori economy. So the Māori community might have needs that they might need things done, and it could be a commercial project there. But definitely build those relationships up and engage. I think, and having and I think this is just creating a good workplace environment where people can share their concerns, whether it's not just for Māori, but for everyone. If they feel unsafe, there should be a safe way to bring it up and have it rectified. But just generally, be a good a good employer.
Yeah, this makes sense. One other question I wanted to ask you on this side is that, what would you recommend for people in or trying to kind of incorporate cultural contexts that are in some cases a bit smaller or may not have as many or any at all, we'll say data professionals, data scientists, data analysts, and this is like, we've been talking about the bias in New Zealand that impacts to what extent Māori people join these fields, but at the end of the day, they compare. I'll focus on Polynesian countries for now, or Polynesian countries is the wrong word. Polynesian cultures, Māori can sometimes have some of the highest proportions in my experience of people in tech doing this kind of work. I remember I would talk to people when I was in Samoa, when I was in Tonga, when I was in different other Polynesian countries that would talk about how they really struggle with the personnel, and and finding people who can do this type of work from within their communities. Some of those communities are a bit smaller in terms of population, and maybe a quick side there, but like in a different podcast, I interviewed an environmental scientist in Samoa who did a lot of work across Polynesia, and she talked about how a lot of the data infrastructure, like to record ecological data, to kind of understand the impacts of climate change, how most of the countries don't have enough people and other resources to like collect the data. So there's huge holes in what type of data is collected. This is maybe one example, but yeah, like what would you recommend for people in these kind of contexts?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a really hard question because, I mean, the infrastructure's not there in a lot of these countries, and the infrastructure's not always there in New Zealand either. It's, I think, that's a really tough question. I guess, just trying to make the roles more appealing, integrate. I mean, you could integrate some traditional knowledge into, and recreate those positions. I mean, at this stage, the data science jobs are very Western in the way that and the way we think about them, the way that the roles are, work each day. But maybe just look at changing that. It's just but. It's a long ongoing issue. It's very difficult.
I mean, that's fair. My final question for you is, what would you, for anyone interested in learning more about your work, or maybe also learning more about what these different kind of frameworks or what different Māori communities have been doing with regard to AI and data science, where would you recommend they check that out, check that out?
Probably my website, taiuru.maori.nz, has most of my work on there. And then I will be referencing the work that I'm doing this year with the New Zealand AI Forum and our Māori group, and different presentations and different work I'm doing this year.
All right, perfect. Well, I'll try to include that in the description below somewhere. Thanks for taking the time.
Good, my pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Cheers.